Welcome to the Mama's Village podcast, CT, where Fairfield County moms discover they're not alone in their struggles while uncovering the hidden gems, local treasures, and real solutions that make motherhood in Connecticut not just survivable, but extraordinary. I am Abby Hartley, your host. And today we have a really great guest and a really great topic of conversation. She is a Fairfield mom of 3 and is passionate in both her professional and personal life about the power of data to make informed, evidence-based decisions. As the PTAC's digital wellness lead, she coordinates events and information sharing for schools, parents, and students to learn more about technology in kids' lives and make informed choices on how to use it. Welcome, Tory Donohue. Thank you so much for speaking with me about this today. We are talking digital health for our kids. I know this is something that's on the minds of a lot of area moms. People really are talking about this topic. And I want to actually ask you just a little bit about how you became the digital wellness lead. Tell me a little bit about yourself. What are your, you have kids in the area, that kind of thing.
So I was raised in Fairfield County. And when the pandemic happened, we moved out to Fairfield with our 4 and 2-year-olds. And I was pregnant with number 3. And we, were having a pretty normal suburban experience, except for the fact that as our kids were coming into the school system, it was during COVID times. So they had split schedules in Fairfield, and they had introduced a lot of technology into the school setting. It kind of mirrored, I think, what was happening more broadly socially to everybody at the time. There was a lot of at-home time with devices. I think even outside of the pandemic, that trajectory was increasing, that we were, increasingly engaging with these newly available tools. And so I just became interested, I think, in what does this mean for us? I didn't grow up this way. I didn't have a phone in my hand, and certainly my parents didn't have mini computers in their hands. And so I think I became really curious at the start. It was honestly a more curious disposition, and in sort of asking some of these questions and trying to connect with others who might know more than I did or share that curiosity, I came to know a group of people, and that is what led to the creation within the PTAC of an initiative focused on digital wellness. PTAC is the PTA committee or council.
In Fairfield?
In Fairfield.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's essentially each of the individual schools has a PTA, a parent-teacher association, and each of those PTAs has a president. So across all the schools, they come together under this PTAC umbrella. And the PTAC also offers cross-functional roles through the school system. So, for example, if you've heard about your child composting in Fairfield Public Schools, it's because the PTAC has the Green Team initiative. So it's not rooted in a single school, but trying to roll out, improvements in the school space across all of the different schools.
Got it. Okay. So wonderful. So you got curious and you decided to get involved, essentially. Great. All right. So we're going to talk about this. I know that that's exactly what happened to us, when my kids were little. My kids are older now. They're teenagers. I have 3 of them. But when they were younger, we were not I'm going to be honest, I was not super worried about the screen time, only because when I was a kid, it was like, don't, get too close to the TV. You're going to go blind and all of that stuff. You know what I mean? And so I was like, it's kind of like that, whatever. And so we did do, iPads. We did, that as they were kids. Obviously, we tried to keep it at a limit, sort of like a TV. You keep it at a limit and, you go outside and play and all of that. And then that is exactly what happened. The COVID started, and it seemed like this was how they were going to continue to be social, is by having phones so that they could text their friends. So admittedly, we started actually with non-texting and with this was another device that they were trying to use. And we'll talk about other options. And it just, at the end of the day, it seemed like texting was the way to go. So we did give our kids devices. Now, there are parents that have kids that are younger now that have the option of not giving their kids devices. So we're going to talk to both me and possibly you, and then we'll talk to those younger parents with younger kids who are in the decision-making phase of when to give their kids devices and, the reasons why not to or why to. But before we get started, I always like to start this podcast and I like to share a little bit about Fairfield County and just the things that are going on around Fairfield County. What kinds of hidden gems, what kinds of things do you like to do? It helps us get to know you and what you like to do with your kids and who you are and that kind of thing. So do you have anything to share that you like to do in the Fairfield County area?
Yeah, the things that I think are sort of most fun, and especially at this time of year, sort of on the heels of summer, getting into fall, we live in an area where for generations, there's been enormous land preservation on behalf of really anyone who wants to use it 100% for free. So I think some of those land trusts are what is most exciting about being here, because you can, in many neighborhoods, honestly, just walk out your door and find a trailhead. We really like Devil's Den Preserve in Weston, and there's just always sort of a new trail to take, a new view to be found. And knowing that the Norwalk Land Trust and the Aspetuck Land Trust actually just merged to create these corridors where you can really feel like you're in the wilderness because you can just go, 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 go. Yeah, it's one of our favorite things to do. So let's wander those trails. And we did get lost one time because it was new fallen snow and we couldn't see the trails. So it's really, it can get wild out there, but it's a lot of fun, especially with kids.
Yes, I love that. That's awesome. Yes, we've done Devil's Den when the kids were little, and it was one of those back in the day. I don't know if you did this back in the day, but when geocaching, and I think actually geocaching was popular, especially around COVID time, because it was like, get outside, go do something. You could potentially like have a community feel like you were in a community because you were leaving these. And that scavenger hunt was actually like one of the most fun things. They had a couple at, the Devil's Den area all over, truly. I mean, in Monroe, they had a couple. That was so fun. That was a really
real.
fun.
Yeah. And even when you just see like a little cairn or rock pile or something that someone's like, people will put gloves on the tree branches that have fallen, you're like, okay, I'm alone, but I'm not alone.
Yes, yes. Love that feeling. Very cool. Yeah, I actually wanted to mention, and this is going to have not a whole lot to do with our topic, but I do want to get it out there that this exists because I do love films. I love TV. I'm a TV producer, so I love it. And I love that Connecticut is actually growing its film and television productions, and it's got a vibrant community. So I just want to shout out to the Norwalk Film Festival and to the Bridgeport Film Festival, which they worked closely together. Bridgeport Film Festival just had their film festival, and the Norwalk Film Festival will be happening in March, and they are currently taking their films. This is a really great, it's just a fun thing to get involved in. If you like film and if you like television, it's just a fun way to see what other people are making and creating, and to get sort of out of that Netflix, it's very algorithmy right now, and to get more creative and see what people are actually creating without the AI, without all of that stuff. It's very local and it's very fun, and it's not very expensive. So one of those things that I just want to give a shout out to. I want to also talk about, when we're talking about digital wellness, do you have anything that you're listening to, reading, or watching, anything like that?
Yeah. So specifically on the topic of digital wellness, I know that The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt sort of burst onto the scene a couple years ago. There were several book clubs in the area from Darien through Fairfield. I know of people discussing this, also discussing it online, and sort of learning about what I would say is more the multidimensional factors that have led us to question, are we doing it the best way possible? Because it's really not just about tech. It's about other choices we make as a society and as communities and parents. And hot on the heels of that is a book by Jean Twenge, who's a researcher out in California, who was one of the earliest researchers to really look hard at the data around technology and tweens and teens. And she just put out a book called 10 Rules for how to raise a teen in an age of high tech. So I think I haven't read that one yet, but I'm excited to. And yeah, I had a book title that's not on the topic of digital wellness, but I wasn't sure if we should stick to that.
Tell
yeah.
us.
And then I think more just for fun. I really love the Irish author Sally Rooney. And her last book, Intermezzo, I had heard so much about and just was putting off reading. So I finally tackled it. And I do. I love it. I have low expectations. She writes from the perspective of two brothers who have lost their dad and are very different people. And they're kind of processing and grieving in different ways and trying to connect across their differences. So it's a book about grief and family relationships and adulthood. And yeah, it's a really good read.
Cool. Very cool. Well, that helps sort of set the stage. We now know you just a little bit more, um, what your likes and dislikes are. And I think that helps because this can feel like it can feel very personal to a lot of families. And I know that there are families that take this, as like a judgment.
Mhm.
So just, we're a judgment-free zone. That's
Absolutely.
not what we're doing. We're just giving some information. And so I just want to preface it with that. But while we let me ask you some questions about what what are some first we'll just start with the main consequences of cell phone use in kids at a young age.
Mhm.
And then what are some of the initiatives that are being taken out to combat this?
Yeah. I mean, one of the great things that might put people at ease is kids are so plastic, like they change every single day. And so, a lot of, I think, what people are struggling with are short term consequences. So, it's really rough if you're in it, especially as a parent and, of course, as a child or teacher. But it can change really quickly. So I think the short term consequences are sort of the main bucket that people are having to manage day by day. I think a really big one it starts with the physical. It's around sleep deprivation or loss of sleep. We see some data that not only are they, of course, staying up later as we all do, sort of looking and scrolling, but that when they do fall asleep, their sleep is much more perturbed if they've had a lot of screen time that day. So, a simple solution of just getting screens out of the bedroom is really helpful because very quickly that consequence can go away. So, it is this kind of short term issue that people face. I think also there are these sort of, it can rock you in terms of self confidence in feeling like people are gathering where I am not, or people have access to material things that I do not. And so, really feeling a little bit less than after a phone binge or a social media binge is a reality. In the longer term, that does seem to be correlated with greater anxiety um, and a sense that it's getting in a little bit to beyond just social media, but the tether that a phone or a smartphone gives you to the world, to resources, to your parents can sort of seem to lay the groundwork for a self belief that I can't do it without support. Young adults are evolutionarily, hitting a phase in puberty where they almost have to defy all the people trying to help them. And give them advice and keep them safe because evolutionarily they're building the skills actively that they need to be independent adults. And so when that coincides with these crutches of I can't do it without access to these things, it can build a sort of longer term self belief system that fuels a lot of anxiety that I actually can't do hard things or I can't do things without a resource that isn't mine. So yeah, and then I know that a lot of parents in the area, because I see the posts and the outreach about it, and I'm connected to some, are struggling with kids who are in full blown tech addiction. And there are amazing hospital-based resources, and we're close to New York that, they have some of the best minds trying to work on how to unwind these kids. But tech addiction for children is a very real diagnosis, and something that can kind of feel like it's taking over your life. So those longer term ones are obviously more scary and more serious. So I think there's both sort of that immediate term and longer term.
Yeah. I was reading about this before we came on, and it was sort of like the dopamine hits all day that they're getting are kind of like when you go to Las Vegas and you're playing the slots and you get these hits of dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin, once you get the likes and all of this stuff, and it all becomes this cycle. It is an addictive cycle. And because their neocortex is not developed or not finished developing, it's very hard to self-regulate out of this cycle. And so it's much different than a television. or than any other sort of, which was sort of like that. You do get those dopamine and those, those hits, but it's more like going to Las Vegas and going to the slots and being addicted to gambling than it is to watching a show on TV, which I think to me was a little bit more eye-opening. It's a little more like, oh, you know, that's a real gambling is a real addiction. That's
It is. And I think one of the things that from a business enterprise standpoint you can commend tech companies for doing is having a hyper effective product. I mean, they absolutely nailed it and used a lot of research that comes from casino-based gambling models of how to retain really high engagement, how to sort of penalize looking away or extracting, like, oh, it's going to be the next slot pull, so I have to stay seated or the guy after me is going to get it. And they leveraged a lot of that research, including around human psychology, and applied it to their tools, their tech tools that we're all using. So they have some of the greatest thinkers and researchers and an enormous body of experience on how human beings interact with certain tools and what reward systems our brains rely on. And they've deployed every single one. So it's like, hats off to you all. You
You
hooked
did
us.
it. Well
You
done.
did it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So, what can we do? And what are some of the initiatives that are being taken right now?
Yeah, so I think, as you said before, it really is a personal choice, and I think, as with any choice anyone makes for their child, it's theirs to make in the context of what they know and how their family's working. And I think that therefore there are sort of this first set of efforts being made at a more institutional level that I would say looks a lot like getting cigarettes out of airplanes or cigarettes out of bars. It's sort of saying this actually does present a collective problem. And so one person or a handful of people doing it will impact the group. That institutional work, I would specifically cite the Digital Wellness Initiative through the PTAC, which is looking at how can all of the students in Fairfield enjoy an environment that's dedicated to learning while at school and remove obstacles to learning. So I think that it's not necessarily distinct from other, again, initiatives at the school level that look at what do kids need, what's going to give them the best environment, and focuses on that from a really like a collective action problem standpoint. If one child comes to school and has devices, or if two and they're communicating using those devices, it really impacts the whole classroom. But most importantly, it pulls in the teacher, who then has to regulate it as the adult. And that definitely impacts all the other kids and their learning, their instructional time.
So, give me an example of what that looks like in a classroom, just like something a little bit more, that we can reference.
Yeah. So at the high school level, what they've historically used are the shoe pouches that hang on the back of a door. And as the children come in, they put their device into the pouch. Obviously, maybe some kids use a burner phone, keep their real phone on them. Maybe the teacher is facing a really big agenda that day and doesn't monitor whether or not every child puts it in there. But the kids are seated, they're working on something, and you're hearing whispering. You're seeing kids move around the room to show each other images. You're looking at heads that are facing down with the tech neck going on, and other kids looking up at the board. And the teachers are pausing, when it's a personal choice, I think, for a lot of these teachers. Do I distract from the instructional time I'm offering these kids who are paying attention to treat the ones who aren't? Or do I stay committed to those who are engaged with me and let the ones who are looking away look away? That's a lose-lose choice that a teacher has to make. And so whatever choice they make, they're taking instructional time away, period, the end. So it's either put the phones in your backpack or everybody get up and go put them in the shoe holder. But I think one of the challenges with that was that those high school classes specifically are short. They're not designed to be full day with the same teacher. And so in and out of every classroom, in and out of the door pouches, regulating every 45 minutes, I think was costing so much from the classroom time.
Very interesting. Okay. And then also, some teachers were relying a little bit on, using the devices, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think they've become so much part and parcel of how we all function that I think it naturally merged with one of the classroom-based tools. So we heard about art history classes where you're taking photos of slides that previously would have been shown on a projector or handed out as, a handout to take home. We've heard about, apps that you download to share documents or critique other people's work. As opposed to passing out a printed essay that you wrote to your partner. So it's not so much that they're using it in ways that analog tools couldn't function. It's they've replaced often, again, as we all have. We don't mail letters as much, we email. We, again, naturally, I think a lot of teachers naturally replaced analog tools with digital tools.
So the initiative is essentially getting the phones out of schools. What does that now look like? We're using now analog tools still. Are we using, are we like trying to pretend that AI doesn't exist, or what are we trying to, how are we trying to make this work?
Yeah, it's a massive transition. And I think I remain hopeful that a lot of the agencies sits with the teachers and the administrators to decide how to make this work. I think that in terms of their ability to have diagnosed the issue and what the challenges were in the school setting, they did that so clearly and articulately that I'm really confident they'll be able to do the same in terms of applying solutions. I do think that there are a couple of different legs of the stool. One is, yes, a return to mechanisms that have functioned for generations. So if you're a parent and you need to be in contact with your child in the school day, you call the home office and leave a message. That's, again, what happened to me growing up. I think the mental accompaniment to that one on the parents' end harkens back to what I was sharing about the anxiety that children can't do things. I think we as parents have absorbed some of that anxiety that they can't do things or that they will be unsafe if they don't have that tether. And so I think for parents, it's also committing to supporting your child in growing up and becoming untethered in an age appropriate way because they do have that adult school infrastructure in loco parentis. School is the parent during the day and relying on that to be supportive of the child. So I think, yeah, some of it is a return to these tools. Others are going to be sort of regulating access. So it's still use of tech. And I think this is what will need to be sorted out. Sort of how does it look at the start of the school day before the phones are away, at the end of the school day, when phones are coming back online, especially for children who are working after school and may need to be getting updates on that, who are using a mode of transportation and need to be getting updates or are negotiating with a coach and need to. So I do think tech will always be in play at some level. It's really just the overlap with the instructional time that the phone-free schools movement was focused on.
Okay. Interesting. And then as far as, and we'll leave phone-free schools in a second, but I just want to, there have been two things that I've heard parents say. One of them is, and this has to do with, emergencies at schools, school shootings, things like that. I want to be able to get a hold of my child if there was an emergency at school. And now with no phone, how do I do that? What is the answer to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, any school emergency is absolutely terrifying. And I don't think those are sadly going anywhere anytime soon. I think that the reality is that it's a little more complicated in terms of what keeps kids safe in an emergency. I think connecting with your child, if you hear that there is an emergency at the school, is the thing that achieves more immediate peace if the child is hopefully well. It doesn't necessarily achieve immediate safety for the child. And those two things are different. So I think if what parents are looking for is peace of mind and easy access, I understand why you would look to a child having a phone for that. If you're looking for safety in an emergency setting, I do think it's a little bit more nuanced. We have school resource officers in Fairfield who are police officers dedicated to being at school throughout the day, and they usually cover a couple schools. My kids' school, our officer, Tiffany Bennett, she's incredible, but she's spoken to this at several town events regarding digital wellness. And what she can explain is there are a couple factors that make it better for everyone if children don't have phones during a school emergency. One is really that they need to be quiet. Phones not only ping and ring, but they get dropped, or someone will instruct someone else what to put in the phone or who to call. It's just a noisy endeavor. Another issue related to phones is that whoever is on the phone with the child could be giving them a set of instructions that doesn't sound like the instructions that the teacher or the person on the ground is giving. You want those children unified and listening intently to what the adult in the situation is telling them to do, not what the parent is telling them to do. You want them focused and hearing that. The last piece of it is that it jams the airwaves in an emergency when everybody's calling. And similarly, you've seen probably photos, parents drive to schools, it blocks the roads, emergency vehicles can't get through. So again, it's a little bit more about what are you looking for, but in the safety, I would say you want to look at how phones actually improve your child's safety when they are in an emergency setting.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. With all that being said, I have so much to say about that because it is so frightening and terrifying. And you just think about like,
Ugh.
there's nothing that's gonna stop me. I'm gonna like run to
Yeah,
where they are. So I don't really care what you're saying. You know what I mean? It's like,
hear that. I think that's what we all have to negotiate. And I think there's individual needs, there are these collective needs. It's a very personal choice. And frankly, I don't know if any of us really can even know what we would do because
yeah.
it's so it's so unthinkable. Um
Staying home is like that's not even
Yep,
an option. Sorry. Like
yep,
they need
yep.
to just know that that's not even.
I get you. And so then
Okay.
it is just I think maybe trying to balance again like what systems we've put in place ahead of time so
Mhm.
that we aren't negotiating with options that are going to harm anyone in
Yeah.
real time. You know, like I think one of the things that we put into place is if a 911 respondent gets a call, they're not immediately tweeting about it so that every parent blocks the roads. They're managing
Mm.
that and they
Yeah.
have systems in place to kind of guide and shepherd communities toward the best way of interacting. And so I really understand the impulses and I try to look at it from a perspective of if you have hundreds of kids in a school, what's going to keep them all safe? Like, and
Yeah.
I don't, we're all operating on instinct as parents and that can't be
Yes.
judged, you know?
Yes. Yes, exactly. Okay. The other thing, less serious, but is also another thing that parents and I hear is that this is just going to be life now. And so how taking it away is not helping us navigate and figuring out how to teach them how to self-regulate and all of that stuff. So what are we saying to that aspect of it?
Yeah, I mean, I strongly agree it is life now. I was watching a movie the other day and the desk had no laptop on it because it was a movie from before that being our work life. And I was like, oh my God, how wild. Just a lamp and some paper. It is, we're never going back to that, you know? And so I strongly agree this is here to stay. It's part of life. We have to learn about it. I think the distinction I would make is what learning amount is developmentally appropriate for them. So kids also will have to learn to drive cars. We are not going back to horses and buggies, but we regulate the ages at which they're instructed and exposed to and finally able to independently operate vehicles. And we license it and we check in. So it's sort of like anything that they will ultimately need to live with. It's a question of when are they exposed? What parts of it are they exposed to? And how are we teaching them along the way to be good operators? And I think that, you know, thinking about that is sort of a both and because yes, it's here to stay. Babies born now are born, you know, whether you're giving them a bottle or nursing or whatever, you're holding a phone in the other hand. That is just life. From day one, they are exposed, but it's a little bit like how they're riding in cars. You know, they are exposed, but they're not driving the car when
Right.
they're 3. And so regulating that access and partnering it with some training and education around what's good for them and why it's to keep them safe, I think is really meaningful.
Yes. Okay. So let's start talking about ages then.
Yeah.
Let's talk about wait until eighth. And I know there are other initiatives like that. What is it about eighth grade? What is it about that, 12, what is it, 12, 13 years old um, age group that we'd like to wait till?
Yeah, I think it comes from a couple of reasons. One is I think like since ancient times, that has been the age of you become essentially an adult. Legally in the US, we also use 18 for a lot of things or even 21. But that 12, 13 culturally, in religion, across the board, it has been always almost understood as this milestone marker of you are transitioning. For us in the US, with our middle school to high school, it's also matched with this leap from sort of lower school to upper school vibes. And I think that a lot of the Wait Until Eighth movement builds off of that, recognizing that children are not only wanting, but again, coming back to what they're evolutionarily demanding and is healthy for them to become independent. They want adult-like things and really need them in a lot of instances. I think Wait Until Eighth looks at some of the physical changes that are going on, a lot of the social developmental changes that are going on. And then, I think acknowledges a lot of the lifestyle changes that happen as you move to high school, and pins itself to that as a really healthy milestone to move from no smartphone to smartphone.
And to anybody that doesn't know what Wait Until Eighth is, do you mind explaining what it is and what the initiative is?
Absolutely. So Wait Until Eighth is a national grassroots movement. And what it does is it invites any individual to pledge on behalf of their child to wait until eighth grade to give them a smartphone. And so what happens is if I pledge, I would put in my child's name, school, and grade. And that would activate the school, or it would, if I'm joining other people, it would be dropped into that bucket. Once you have 10 children in a grade at a school who have pledged, it's essentially an unlocking. And everybody is put into a community to say, these are the kids who are not alone if they don't have a smartphone. These are the kids who are going to be finding other ways to communicate and leveraging other tools. But it was a little bit to combat, I think, the isolation and sort of like you're a freak component that could accompany my child doesn't have a smartphone, or from the kid's perspective, I don't have a smartphone, by collectivizing it and saying, no, you're actually not the only one. There's all these other people. So Fairfield has done an amazing job. There's over 800 families that have pledged, and so across every single school. The middle schools have the highest pledge rates, I think, because they're really staring down the barrel of do I, don't I? But there is a lot of power in community. And so knowing that these children are supported and not isolated and not made to feel any different than anyone else is part of what's at the heart of the movement.
That's great. And then there was another one. Wasn't there another initiative?
Yeah, so I should definitely mention, so another initiative that's a little bit more local is called OK to Delay. So I think that back to what you opened with, just in terms of concern about judgment or passing opinions off on others, OK to Delay doesn't have a milestone moment. It's really about extending childhood and celebrating all the parts of what childhood can be when it's not anchored or overpowered in the worst cases by technology. So OK to Delay is more about, I would say, connecting with other people outside of just your school, because Wait Until Eighth's pledge is really uniting school communities. OK to Delay is at a broader community level and hosts events and hosts meetups and shows films, but sort of brings people broadly together around understanding what the options are, what decision is right for their family, and why delaying could be a useful thing to consider as people look at what date am I going to choose for this smartphone drop.
So we've got, a couple of options here. If you've decided that you would like to delay, and or if you're like me and you've already given the phone and you're like, you know what, I don't like this, let's just take it away. I can't do that. I literally
No,
can't.
it's so hard.
If I did that, and I know that there are some sort of, don't you guys at the Westport Library, I believe, have tech fairs or something where you talk about what the alternatives are? Or so what are some of the alternatives that we're seeing?
Yeah, so the Westport chapter of OK to Delay hosted an alternative device fair at the Westport Library last spring. It was super well attended. They had reps from all of the different companies that are not the traditional smartphone. Some are designed for children in mind. Some are just designed for tech addicts at any age who want to regulate their use a bit more. But it was a really exciting moment to kind of see, hold, touch, play with. It was like you were in like a Best Buy of healthy options. So I would say in general, sort of some of the options look like phones that were smart. They're essentially still smartphones in that they look and act like an app-based communication device, but they're designed to guide children away from some of the more nefarious components or apps that can show up. They include the Gab phone, GABB. It has a couple of models that kind of age with your child. So some of them they don't allow any apps whatsoever. So you're really just listening to music, calling, texting, but so it can be a communication. It's like a telephone. But with the music piece, they also have a watch, but if you upgrade to the older models, like they have a high school one, essentially it's designed with baked in software to allow the parents to better regulate what apps are going on there and what traffic is flowing through the phone. So one of the most, I think, safety minded components of these phones, it's the Gab. There's something called the Bark phone, which I want to speak to because it's beyond just that device. The Gizmo is a watch that I know a lot of people have used. What these software developers have done is think about what is it about these devices that's really harming kids. It's the addictive nature where they can't get off it to go see their friends or play outside or get sleep. But it's also the access to information that's not developmentally appropriate. Really early exposure to pornography, really early exposure to adult predators on the internet, other apps that kind of can push product on children that you wouldn't want them seeing, or engage with them on issue areas that might not be appropriate, like suicidality or self-harm. So what the software developers did behind these phones is they baked in language reviews and language models that will ping a parent if there's content that may be creeping up on one of those sort of boundaries you'd want to set. So if something that looks like a nude photo is being shared because your kid's texting another friend, you would see it first and be able to review it before it got out into the big bad world. If there are words that they're searching for, just like on school-issued Chromebooks, they have the same tech, you would get a ping that that word is being searched for. Weapons or, other terrible things. So it's just interesting because back to what we were saying about gambling, they came at it from a perspective of what technology design will keep kids safe as opposed to what technology design will sell the most. So it's a really different angle.
Bark is one that does that?
Yeah, so Bark is an amazing product because it actually was designed by this husband-wife duo as a home router, a Wi-Fi router. And what it does is it regulates the internet content that's in your house. So they didn't actually start it as a phone or personal device. They started it as like a blanket your home internet safety because kids do have school issued Chromebooks. Kids are also basically all hackers at this point, and it's a very tall hill to climb to stay ahead of them. And so what these adults did is they designed it where you can have Wi-Fi downtime. So if you do want to enforce that bedtime, it's not just that you have to grab the device out of your child's hand, the Wi-Fi will shut off. Or it can regulate certain internet protocols for certain access to certain sites. So again, back to like a lot of, especially young boys consuming enormous amounts of pornography and especially violent pornography and learning about adult lifestyles through that portal. Bark is a router that allows you to kind of manage what internet content or internet garbage is coming in and out of your house.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I love these ideas actually. And putting something on, the one thing that I saw was something called the brick. And you basically put this brick on your refrigerator. It's magnetized, and they tap their phone on the brick when they leave for school, and basically everything shuts off besides the actual phone. They come back home and like either whatever time is their time that they can use the phone. You can tap it, and whatever apps that they're allowed or the messaging or whatever it is able to reactivate. So they have specific times, that you can turn on and off. That was interesting to me just because, as far as I'm concerned, the time I want them at night to be able to turn it off, and I guess but I do love the idea of knowing what's going on, not having to, there's something about their privacy. I don't love the idea of being like, "Can I see your phone?" It just feels very yucky, and when somebody does that to you, it makes you feel kinda yuck, like you don't trust me, and it's not that. It's just I just wanna see what's going on.
I think it's also challenging when you are trying to convey to your child, you are competent, you are
Right.
capable, you are
Yeah.
smart, to then say, show me your phone.
Yeah.
I don't trust you actually to manage. So I think that I totally think that would be something I could relate to. One of the things that I heard a speaker mention that I found so elucidating is he spoke about the promise of the internet and how incredible, the potential was and really is that anyone anywhere could go searching for information and find it. And it's like opening this magical box of the entire world of knowledge of all history. And you could grab what you needed and close it and go away and move along your life. And what the internet has sort of become, so he called that the pull model. You're pulling what you need and want from it. What he was explaining, especially through social media, that the internet has become is this push model where you open an app and you're suddenly 3,000 posts deep because it is being fed to you. You're not looking for it. You didn't ask to see or search for. It's algorithmically driven content that flows no matter what you do. And the push model is so much more dangerous because it gets people to places they didn't want to be and might not be ready for. So I hear you on that. And I think one of the things to recognize and potentially explain to kids is like, I know you weren't trying to get there or look for that, or you may not have searched it, but this is something that will take you places you didn't ask to go. And acknowledging that and needing to kind of have antenna up around it, I think can mitigate some of that trust issue where it's like, it's actually not about you, it's about this device.
Yes, I love that, and I love these apps that allow you to sort of be involved in that without having to make it feel like it's your kid's fault. I think that that's really
Totally.
yeah.
Totally.
So once a child reaches high school, are we saying that they're now able to self-regulate? When, as far as you're concerned, and, maybe this is a personal thing, and I know it is it I mean, I can't even tell you that I'm able to self-regulate. Am I addicted? Because I probably am. You know what I mean? So at what point are you like, it's okay to be addicted to this now?
Yeah, I hear that. I mean, I do think the Surgeon General has talked about this as a public health crisis. We are all affected by it. Nobody's doing great. I mean, maybe some people are, and that's awesome for them. It's very hard to do well in this environment. So I really feel and share that. I always wish I could be off my phone more, and it's really hard. I wouldn't say high school appears, from what we understand, to be like a golden moment of you're free from all concern. But I would acknowledge, kids grow up, they start to make independent choices. Their identity is really forming of who they want to be and how they want to show up. They're often looking at what happens after high school. And so they are making the bridge between what I decide to do now matters for my future self, and they care about their future self. So I do think it's a little bit of matching that, ongoing, you are my child, I am your steward until you're 18 and out of my house. You're still calling the shots on what's healthy, but at the same time, offering that independence and exploration. And I say no phrase in my house more frequently than this one. You make mistakes to learn, and kind of celebrating the hopefully smaller failures as essential to the practice of learning what to do better next time. If they stay up all night on their phones, they're going to feel crappy the next day. And that is important for them to learn and experience. When it becomes chronic and decimates their friendships and relationships and grades, they do need help still sometimes. I think a lot of the tech addiction seems to hit in high school. So I wouldn't say anyone's out of the woods, but I would say, as with everything else, like think back to the driving metaphor, like we're teaching them, we're getting them in the vehicles. It is terrifying. They can get in accidents, and yet we do it. We persist. So I think finding that, again, safe, instructional, I'm empowering you with a scary, dangerous tool, use it wisely, is kind of the message across the board, whether it's really anything that parents choose to introduce their kids to in that time.
Yes. Okay. So as far as all of this is concerned, do you have a specific call to action to any of the Fairfield County moms or dads that, should they go to Wait Until Eighth .org? Should they go, like what should we do to get involved in this? Or, what's the next step as far as like talking to our teens?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would come back to where we started and just advocate curiosity. What is my kid engaging with? How are they doing? Am I comfortable with that? Is my partner comfortable with that? Do their friends seem like, are we okay? I think is a good place to start, because if you are, like, the call to action here is like, please call me and tell me what you did. Because I think that's all of us just want our kids to be okay. So I would just start with curiosity. And I think talking to teachers about how your kid is doing or managing tech in school, if that's a part of their life. I think talking to friends, parents about what they're seeing when kids are hanging out, like listening, deeply listening to, is this going well? I think if people are looking for ways to individually mitigate and manage their family's tech use or their child's tech use, I think the anxious generation and 10 rules for raising a kid in a high tech world are two really phenomenal resources, because they essentially, one really lays out the landscape of what your child's facing. And I think a lot of us as parents don't even understand it. I had to watch a lot of documentaries to grasp Snapchat. And I
Mm,
had no idea how scary it is and how dangerous it is to be a child, basically.
yeah.
So learning really about what your kid is coming up against, what is being pushed on them, I think is key. And I think some of that could involve talking to teachers, the school resource officers I mentioned, the principals, to try and get a sense of that. I think on a collective level, looking at, feel free to email me about the digital wellness initiative and sort of what sort of broader collective movements you could be part of. We have ambassadors in every school, and the ambassadors are actively sharing out information with the principal, with the school community, trying to make sure everybody has access to the same information to make those decisions. And yes, individually, and I really would encourage you to bring your kid into the conversation, want to commit to, we are going to set milestones and you will get there, kiddo, but you are not there today. Wait until 8th will bring you into a school community, and joining OK to Delay in Fairfield will bring you into this broader community of events and resources. So I think if you're interested, I think both are the way to go, because they complement each other. But I think, fundamentally just staying open and curious is really key to knowing what these kids are going through.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me, and for all the listeners. I know that this is a big topic right now, and we're all just trying to figure it out. So thank you so much for helping us do it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It was so fun to chat.
Yes. Okay.